I'd like to start this video by having you look at this picture and seeing what you notice. And I think one of the things that you would say is that you notice that there's a bunch of squares in this picture. And these are the squares that I'm referring to. And the reason I chose this picture is because today we're going to be talking about area and how to determine the area of something, measure the area of something. So imagine you're at home in your living room and you take a blanket and you smooth out the blanket to cover up part of your living room floor. That would be like, what area of your living room floor did you cover up? And we use squares to determine area. So in this picture we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 squares. 18 squares. And I'm just going to write square. And since we don't know the distance of each square, like the side of we don't know the distance of the side of each square, for this we're just going to say it's 18 square units. Now maybe it was measured in miles. If it was miles, we would say 18 square miles. If it was feet, we would say 18 square feet. But since we don't know for sure, we're just going to say square units. So I've got some terms up here: units, squared, and square units. Either way would be correct to say that. You could also write it like this: units squared, with a little exponent, the number 2 up there. That number 2 tells us that we're talking about square units or square miles or whatever it is we're using to measure. So on your home link, you will note it. You have some problems that look like this or similar to this. And so for this first rectangle we have up here, if we're going to measure this, again, we don't know what unit of measure we're using. We don't know if it's miles or inches or feet or centimeters. So we're just going to go with kind of a standard square units for this. So to figure out the area of this rectangle, we'll just count the squares: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So for this rectangle, it would be 15 square units. Now we come down here to this next rectangle, and you'll notice, if we imagine this was drawn perfectly, you notice that these aren't full squares. They're a little bit smaller, and we can use this measurement here to help us know that this is 4.5. So we have 4 full squares and then a half square here. To determine the area of this rectangle, we're just going to count the full squares: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I know there's 8 full squares, and then we also have the 2 half squares here. So if we have 2 halves of a cookie, we have a whole cookie. So half a square and a half a square equals a whole square. So if we added that whole square to the 8 squares, we would get 9. And so for the area of this rectangle would be 9 units squared. And remember, we can say units squared, we could say square units, or we could use the small exponent 2. They would all be the same thing. Then the last example I'm going to have here that you're going to see on something similar on your home link is where they don't have the whole thing drawn in. So for this rectangle here, we have 4 full squares, and then we have this spot here. We can't count this as 1 square. We can't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what we do is we finish those lines, and then we count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So for this last rectangle, it would be 18 units squared. So there's a brief introduction to area. The big things I want you to remember is that whenever we're measuring area, we're thinking of squares. So if you have a tile floor at home, those squares are a good example. Or the picture on the first page of the farmland with the squares. Area is always measured using squares. Then, to label those problems, we could say square units, we could say unit squared, or you could say, this is also said units squared. And if we use unit squared if we don't know what the unit of measure is. So if it was miles, we would say miles squared. If it was inches, we would say inches squared. If we're not sure, we go with unit squared. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, make sure you ask your teacher, and stay tuned for future videos.